this presentation, you will learn about the non-Brahmin perspective. In the study of Indian society, scholars have used various perspectives such as Indology, structural functionalism, cultural, and Marxist. The Indological perspective stressed on ideals of Hindu society such as dharma, karma, moksha, etc., while the structural functional perspective of Parsons and Merton emphasized on integration. Merton's reference model was widely used to understand social mobility. The structural orientation began stressing on power structure, family structure, and social stratification. The Indian sociologists were influenced by the theoretical orientation of Durkheim, Weber, and Marx. The culturological approach to sociology started with the studies of M. N. Srinivas on religion and society among the Kurs of South India. This study brought forth the concepts such as Brahminization, Sanskritization, and Westernization. The dialectic historical approach based on the Marxist perspective and method was considered by some scholars to be the most suitable perspective to understand Indian social reality. A. R. Desai, who advocated dialectic historical approach, focused on inequality, power and property relations, and the perspective of the marginalized who were involved in new social movements. Post-independence, due to land reforms and wage legislation coming into force, the dynamic relations in agrarian society were seen to be apt. As the protest movements gained momentum, the life of the oppressed became core of study. However, to study the oppressed people, various theories emerged, like theory of relative deprivation and the subaltern perspective, but it was considered inadequate. The non-Brahmin social reformers not only questioned the Brahminical hegemony, but also developed their own philosophies and ideology. They critically analyzed historical writings and interpreted Brahminic production of knowledge. The factors that led to the emergence of non-Brahminism was creation of public space and development of idea of rights and outcome of colonial rule. The discontinuation of old socio-political order influenced the social and traditional relations of society. The new socio-economic order, cultural changes, and revenue collection policies dislocated people from their traditional occupation and social status. Due to these changes, various social groups started their pursuit for new social identities and alternatives. This search for new identities and alternatives was multidimensional. The growth of consciousness and political awakening was an outcome of these reactions. As the life of people was not much organized during this period, the consciousness that emerged was scattered among various groups. The term consciousness here means beginning of the resistance or protest among various social groups. However, in the beginning, these movements lacked ideological force. In most of the cases, the origin of social consciousness among the non-Brahmins in India in 19th century was part of general public consciousness. It was only during the 20th century that the non-Brahmin movements gained concrete shape. The protest movement against Brahminical dominance emerged in different parts of India. For example, in South India, a Ravipuram movement by Sri Narayan Guru and self-respect movement by Periyar, Western India Satyasojak Samaj by Phule, but the movement reached its peak under the leadership of Dr. Ambedkar. Although the approach of these social reformers were different, but the ideas remained the same: emancipation of the oppressed. They questioned the writings and works of scholars who, while defining India, were immensely influenced by the worldview of Hinduism, which privileged the Brahmins. They challenged the Brahmanical production of knowledge and gave voice to the marginalized and the oppressed section of Indian society. Sharmila Rege pointed that for the colonialists and nationalists, the nature of knowledge was essentially Hindu and Brahmanical, but after Second World War, the social science discourses altered the binaries of Orient and Occident, the tradition and modernity, or indigenous approaches, all of which explained the structural inequalities in Indian society and normalized the knowledge production and education project offered in India to be Hindu and Brahmanical. For her, Phule and Ambedkar, by their emancipatory non-Vedic traditions of Lokyata, Buddha and Kabir, and Western ideas of Thomas Paine, John Dewey, and Karl Marx, challenged the binaries of modernization and Indian tradition, private caste and gender, with public nation, and strived to refashion modernity and thus its project of education. P.K. Omen contend that the view from below is an old and enduring issue in sociology. The traditionally oppressed and stigmatized groups, which are homogeneous and partially emancipated and empowered, began getting voice. These groups started questioning the knowledge produced by the upper caste men and bourgeois. The necessity to give representation to them in the production of knowledge gained recognition, though reluctantly. Thus, those who were at the bottom of the society and invisible due to the upper class, urban, middle class male researcher became the core and claimed their legitimate stake in the production and representation of knowledge. To summarize, Indian sociology is plural and multidimensional, which is manifested in the various programs of the study, research, and publication. After independence, certainly it has come out of the shadow of colonialism and moved forward indigenization of research and curricula. The non-Brahmin perspective is based on the premises that there is relation between knowledge and power. This relation influences the social reality. The non-Brahmin perspective raises the question on how to understand India. It argues that for long the Indian society has been identified as Hindu society. Therefore, the concepts such as inequality and discrimination, hierarchy, injustice, etc., were not matter of sociological discussion. So, there was a demand for an alternative approach to understand Indian society. This approach was political in nature, as it not only questioned the politics behind knowledge generation, but also incriminated the self that was involved in the procedure of knowledge creation, consumption, and circulation. The radical social thinkers from various parts of India confronted the Brahmanical creation of knowledge and gave voice to the marginalized section of Indian society with their emancipatory perspective. The non Brahmin perspective also took up the cause of women's liberation by emphasizing on girls' education, widow remarriage, and so on. It envisaged a society based on equity and justice. I hope you now have a better understanding of the non Brahmin perspective. Thank you for watching the presentation.